Hey everybody, thanks for coming. This is the first meetup this year for New York City Clover Developer Group. So welcome everybody. We also are doing this in conjunction with the Google Developer Group, and we're going to hear from them in a second. Just a little bit about ourselves. I'm Daniel Rolnick. I am the Chief Technology Officer here at ShopKeep. ShopKeep is the #1 rated from Trustpilot and iOS App Store reviews point of sale and tablet to cloud payment solution for small businesses. We focus in the quick service restaurant space, where you go up to a counter, order food, and bring it back to your table. Full retail locations where you might bring an item up to a counter, pay for that, and bring it home. And then full service restaurant and bar where people come and do table service, that sort of thing. It's an incredibly competitive space, and we think that our product is well positioned to help small businesses succeed and thrive because of the analytics that we bring to them up in the cloud. Our engineers are working across multiple platforms, iOS, Android, server-side technologies like React and Ruby and things like that. If you're interested, we're always hiring. You may have seen some of the things up. But without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to James Chang from Clover. Now, you might find it a little interesting that we're working with Clover, but Clover and ShopKeep have partnered, and we're trying to bring our software to their platform because we really do think that their hardware is a good solution for us as well. So let me hand it over to James.
Thank you. Actually, I would like to bring up Donna from GDG New York City to actually talk about the meetup group.
I don't need to use this. Okay, hi. I see that some of you are from the Google Developer Group, New York City, and we are the official Google Developer Group in New York City, and we're to like 4,000, close to 4,100 members. And because of our scale, we can draw on really important developers from the Google group. And I urge you to join at meetup.com GDG NYC. Our next meetup is at August 7th, Monday, and it's on Android things and robocars. And at 4 o'clock, we're going to have a code lab with the Android Things kit. So if anyone's interested, please sign up. And I'll hand it over to James Shaw of the Clover Development Group meetup.
Thank you very much. So I'm not that important compared to Duane, so we'll hand it up to Duane really quick. But my name is James Cha. I also run a GDG group in San Francisco. So we're all part of the family, so they partnered with us to do this meeting. So I am a developer advocate for Clover. So Clover has a platform that developers can build on top of. So I'm gonna hand it over to Duane, who is the vice president of engineering at Clover. And in DevRel, my team, we call him the all-knowing because he knows everything about Clover. So I'm gonna pass it on to him.
Okay. All right, thanks. All right, let's see if we can do this here. Okay, thank you. So everyone can hear all right? Good? Okay. Thanks for coming out. Thanks to our hosts from ShopKeep and the sponsors from the Google Development Group. So this is kind of a slightly different form of a presentation that we gave at the Google I/O conference in Mountain View back, 2 months ago? A couple months ago. And so we updated the Clover devices to work with a new enhanced form of NFC that can do lots of new, neat, and interesting things, which we'll talk about here. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about, as Daniel mentioned, kind of the partnership with ShopKeep. So Clover, as you'll be able to see, does some what we call point of sale or kind of like electronic cash register types of functions. But we like partnering up with folks like ShopKeep who have really good software kind of in that same category. But when partnered up with the Clover hardware, maybe in a customer-facing mode, right, it's a very powerful combination, right? And so this ability to do the chip card, EMV acceptance, NFC, magnetic stripe, and all of that in a customer-facing platform, right? That as developers, we're providing the ecosystem that developers can enhance and bring their own solutions to, we think that's a real, powerful combination, right? So we want, that Clover device to be able to fit in there, even in situations there where folks have already got an existing point of sale solution, right? And we can do that payment processing and also provide that nice customer-facing platform. So just one slide where I talk briefly about Clover, just for any of you who have not been familiar with the Clover devices or sort of the overall Clover ecosystem before. So we wanted to, interestingly with Clover, we sort of evolved from a cloud-based point of sale system as well, and kind of sort of fell into developing our own hardware in some respects. But we looked at the state of kind of what's possible there with existing sort of point of sale and payment acceptance solutions, and you usually see this sort of brick, this single function device that does the credit card swiping, right? And they're really kind of ugly, and they've got a big pin pad on it, and it's not very exciting, right? And so we set out to build really beautiful hardware, good industrial design, very rugged and reliable. And kind of have that sort of modern design aesthetic, the Apple-like kind of look and feel, and the merchants really would kind of respond to that. And so our first generation device here was this the Clover Station, and this was kind of the first device there that sort of it's based off of the same platform as I think it's the Google Nexus 7. Sort of 2012 edition, I think. But that basically has, it's got an integrated credit card magnetic stripe reader. And when we moved along to some of the newer devices there, we added the EMV chip cards. So you may remember in the news, the chip cards were big around in the fall of 2015. And so all the newer devices that we've got have added those. And then we've got a Clover Go device over here as well. So, went back somehow. Okay, so yeah, here's the Clover device family. So just real brief overview of that. And our newest here is the Clover Flex. And so I wanted to kind of maybe dive straight in and just raise your hand or stop me if you've got any kind of specific questions. So I'll sort of try to calibrate a little bit of how far deep dive we go there or whatever. So I can go real technical on some of the slides, or we can stay up at a higher level. So if I'm going too deep in there into the embedded code or whatnot, just stop me. But so out of the box here, everything but the Clover Station up here, and this is the Clover Mobile that I've got right in front of me. All of these can do the standard NFC, right? So you've seen that with most people in the U.S. now think of it with Apple Pay, right, or Android Pay. And so the ability to do, and we sometimes call that contactless payments. So that's kind of multiple different kinds of names. But the near-field capability antenna that is built into, again, all of these devices apart from the Clover Station, that provides support for what we call EMVCo, which is the sort of a standards body that governs these sort of payment technologies. And so the Clover devices there will support these standard NFC payment schemes. Now this is, a lot of people think of NFC and RFID kind of based on some similar technologies. But the NFC payment is a very kind of, specific specification there. And along with the major card associations there, so Visa and MasterCard, Discover and American Express, there's a few other sort of contactless schemes that we would end up supporting that are more specific for other regions maybe. But we certify basically that payment capability or that NFC capability to accept contactless payments for those card schemes across each of these different devices. And so this is sort of a couple screens that we show here. If you have a Clover device that's in the customer-facing mode, right? And so this could be connected to a ShopKeep system, or it could be connected to a Clover Station, let's say on the merchant-facing side. So we're talking about merchant-facing has a Clover Station, and then on the customer-facing side, you've got, let's just say, a Clover Mini here for argument's sake. And so we're showing here this, there we go, the order screen, and then when we get to say, okay, you presented all your items, okay, and I click pay from the merchant side. Then we get this payment acceptance screen here, right? And so this is a rendition that I captured off of my Clover Mini device earlier today, and this gives you a little brief thing saying, okay, you can swipe your card here, insert if you've got a chip card, and then of course if we swipe and it has a chip, it's going to prompt and say, no, idiot, put in the chip instead, right? So you've probably experienced that. And then you've got this NFC logo down here, right? Now, the EMVCo and all these standard card schemes are trying to be real specific about what you can do with those NFC payments because they want it to be, they want customers to have a good experience and have it to be, move towards sort of the universal acceptance. Probably you've all experienced, the same thing I have, which is it's not really universal. It's kind of, it's not that great, right? Not consistently. When I try to pay for it in the taxi, like 1 out of 1 times, it fails on the first contactless thing. So this is very troubling to us because we feel like the Clover devices have very good NFC support, right? But at the same time, the contactless, the payment there, what is it you're really saving? You're like, oh, you don't have to take your wallet out and the credit card out, but okay, but you have to take your phone out of so you're not really saving that much, right? So there, in some respects, there's not a whole lot of additional value that, in just terms of a normal transaction, right? If all you're doing is just doing the payment with that. So this is where the technologies like the Google Smart Tap and what we call NFC value-added services will come in, okay? So Google Smart Tap, and I mentioned here related technologies. I don't know if we have anyone who works for Google, but the related technologies I refrained from putting on a slide just to be safe there. But there's a complementary technology from Apple that's really just called NFC VAS, right? And so Apple with the iPhone is going to support the same kind of mechanism that we're talking about here. And so Clover in probably Q3 of this year, basically, we're going to have this support for Google Smart Tap via Android Pay and Apple value-added service, NFC value-added service for Apple Pay, right? And so both of these are geared towards, the specs are very, very, very similar, right? But they're designed to add these value-added services on top of NFC, okay? So what does this mean? So one example here for probably most of your locals here from New York maybe, so if you've gone into the Duane Reade or Walgreens, they come up there and they say, do you have a rewards card or whatnot, right? And you can go in and tap your phone if you've got that Walgreens or Duane Reade thing stored in your phone with this digital pass, right? Now they do it in a similar way to what we're going to show for this demo, which is tap ahead of time, and that way we know if you've got a discount applied or any kind of thing like that, you can do this ahead of time before you initiate the payment, right? So this is one scenario, right? Another scenario is you just tap once, basically say pay with the phone, and you can initiate the payment that's going to come from your credit card there, and it will do the value add service. So if there's a loyalty or rewards type of thing tied in with that, and you're accumulating some rewards points, then we can do that all within one single transaction, right? So this is what we're going to enable when this capability is fully launched in the Clover platform, right? And then we have a capability there where we say you can use NFC there for these alternate payment methods. So imagine you've got gift card, Starbucks gift card, something like this, right? And so instead of having that physical gift card, we can load that gift card in as a digital pass, and you may have some of those in your digital wallet right now that maybe you take out and you scan with a QR code, maybe in some cases, but nobody likes a QR code. They suck. It's bad. Scanning experience is not that great, right? So if we can get all these things enabled with NFC, this is the best approach, right? This is really nice. So the thing that, because this is the Clover Development Meetup and the GDG, but since we want to focus on the Clover as a platform, not just as a capability, for merchants there, we're going to basically implement this support for NFC value-added service and make it so that anybody developing an app on the Clover platform, whether it's on this customer-facing side or on the merchant-facing, can basically take advantage of this. And we'll see in a second here how the the flow sort of works there, where we load this pass into our wallet, the consumer's digital wallet, and then that information can be transmitted over to the Clover device. Okay. So this thing here, a lot of text, so I might just jump to the next slide, which is basically the graphical rendition of this. So, but I'll pause here for a second and let you kind of maybe read a little bit of this. But what this is describing here is basically more or less what we demonstrated at the Google I/O event, right? And so at the Google I/O, some of the marketing geniuses at Google basically came up with, they said, all right, we want this ability to basically have the customers come in and have an experience with Android Pay. So we're going to basically force them to load Android Pay on their phone. And we want some incentive for them to basically come up and use this technology, right? Because you can get those developers in there, just kind of like we're doing here, and get them to advocate for this technology. This is the best thing, right? So they said, all right, we're going to hand out these treats. It was, I think, donuts one day and ice cream and some other things. And we're going to do this in order to get the treat. Basically, it'll be free, but you have to go in and just present your Android Pay pass here or whatever, and use the Smart Tap functionality in order to get this treat, right? And then at the end of the Google I/O, they also handed out these things, which I'll hand out some at the end for the best questions that we get. But it was amazing to me how just developers at this conference, they were just nearly fighting over these things. They're like, and the whole point was, okay, you have to be able to go to each one of the stations. There's like 4 or 5 different stations loaded up with the Clover software and the Google Smart Tab, and you had to go basically visit each one of the stations in order to get these things. And man, I mean, people really love this stupid, cheap little gadgets or whatever. But anyway, so it was a great sort of marketing gimmick or whatnot. But anyway, so this is my best rendition in Keynote from this afternoon of the flow. So we start off here with a pass. So this pass, it's a digital pass that has a specific ID that's registered with Google in this case. If we're talking about Apple Pay, it's going to be registered in a similar type of way with your sort of app ID and whatnot. And the pass basically is just some JSON, really, basically, right? And it's going to have an image in there and a couple different things, right? And so this pass needs to get loaded onto the consumer's NFC device, which is the smartphone, right? And so this is kind of the interesting product decision for us right now, is how do we enable this the best possible way, right? Because most of the Clover software here is on the merchant side, right? So now we need to get, okay, how are you going to get that pass loaded onto the consumer's phone? We'll talk about one way that's possible through Google Smart Tab and Apple VAS to sort of automatically load that on there in certain ways. But this is basically whether you've got the customer's email and you send them a link that says save this to Android Pay, and we can show kind of some more specific here with the at least on the Google phone, you can go directly and say from Android Pay, say add a loyalty card, right? And so it can look it up from the common directory and all that. And I think that's how, if I remember correctly, how they did it at the Google I/O for the most part. Said, okay, add it, and it pulled up, and it said, all right, you're at Google I/O, so pull up the Google I/O loyalty pass, right? So it's kind of some sense a made up thing, right? Because you were just there for a few days. But in any case, get this pass loaded onto the consumer's NFC device, right? And so now at the point of sale, right? Then the consumer is going to go up and tap that onto, and I've listed here these 2 Clover devices, right? Now, as I mentioned, in certain scenarios, maybe this is going to be the iPad with ShopKeep running on it, right? But for our purposes, we'll just assume this is Clover customer-facing device and the merchant device. So the Clover Station and the Clover Mini that we've got here that's what's kind of represented with that. And so over NFC, and the next slide that I've got kind of delves into a little bit more of our internal implementation details, which you may or may not care about, but I'll talk about it anyway. But this basically, the standard NFC payment flow, standard flow for NFC payments basically dictates some low-level, what we call APDUs. So these are just the data packets that go back and forth. And this basically provides a standard way to look up and say what they would call an application IDs are supported and whatnot. And so for this NFC value-added service, there's basically a step right before that says, okay, go in and select, I forget what it's select OSE, but I forget what that stands for exactly. But that happens right before you initiate that NFC payment. And all of this basically has to happen in just fractions of a second, right? So this is, on these Clover devices, there's an ARM-based secure processor that runs this embedded code or whatever. And this has to happen very, very quickly, right? And so this information there to do this NFC value-added service takes place first, right? And if we detect that there is basically send, so this initiates the NFC transaction. We then send from the Clover device a message over to the NFC device saying, okay, do you have this OSE environment? It comes back and says yes. We say, okay, get this value-added service data, right? And we send over an ID here, and if there's a pass that's loaded up with that ID, then we come back and basically the pass information is essentially transmitted to the Clover device, right? Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. And from there, then we take, and for the purposes of this demo, basically, the information that was encoded in the pass is basically the customer ID. We take look up the customer ID on this device, transmit it over to here, and then during the actual payment transaction, then here, we process the payment here, and then we send it to the reward server. So these are kind of, consider this part of the same system maybe, but we process the fact that transaction has taken place on this reward server. And my colleague over here has done most of that work. And then what we can do in that is actually send a message back to Google, an Android Pay service, and update that pass so dynamically it can get updated on the phone, right? So this is now, as you can see, much more, again, a value-added experience over just saying, okay, yep, you just paid, for this, piece of candy or whatever through NFC, kind of, big deal. Okay, so any questions on this so far? Okay. All right, so I'm going to show a little bit here, and this is, some of this stuff is still in design, particularly this, what the specifics of the API are for the, yeah, go ahead.
I want to ask you a question. When the users, I guess, I don't know if everybody agrees, do not activate NFC all the time on their phone because of battery issue and all these issues that are going on with NFC and their assumptions.
Yeah.
What happens? Oh,
Sorry.
Okay.
So if users are disabling their NFC feature on their phone, when they go to tap, is there some sort of trigger that says the NFC is not active? Or given that most merchants are kind of clueless as to what's happening with each individual phone,
Yeah.
what happens here? It just it's a bad experience?
Well, it's an interesting question because personally, I'm an iPhone user, for in my daily use, and so I think that the iPhone architecture in some respects is quite nice because they have sort of the I'm not sure even that you can disable Apple Pay. Of course, you cannot turn on Apple Pay. You cannot load cards into it, right? I'm not sure once it's loaded in there that you can even disable NFC. There are specific things. So I bought this Samsung phone in order to test this whole functionality. The Samsung Pay does not implement the value-added service at this time. Our understanding is maybe they're going to have a spec that's very similar. But yeah, this is an issue, right? And so what the hope is from Clover's perspective, and then our partners at Google and Apple, is that this is an incentive for folks, right? If you don't have to take out your loyalty card, just not taking your credit card out of the wallet, as I said, is maybe, okay, great. I still have to take something out of my pocket, in order to pay, right? But if I can, I get this loyalty, reward points accumulations, and all these other kinds of services just by tapping with the phone, right? And there's kind of various promotions kind of going in place to basically say, hey, encourage you to pay via NFC. These are the types of things I think that need to happen, but there's not a real good answer about sort of if they have the wrong basically NFC turned on, and we did have that at the Google I/O. Some folks said Samsung Pay. We said no, turn that off and turn on Android Pay. Well, this kind of stinks because you've got a Samsung phone. They're going to want you to install Samsung Pay, right? So in any case, this is maybe an issue, right? That the hope is that make the consumer experience more compelling, and this provides a better incentive for folks to want to use NFC, Apple Pay, or Android Pay more often, right? So yeah, go ahead. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. This gentleman here in the blue. Yeah.
The customer and merchant device, does it have to be two separate devices, or can it be combined in one potentially?
It certainly could be one device. Now the challenge there, of course, is whether you have. So we have within the Clover Mini device, for example. Some merchants would have more like a kind of lazy Susan, right, to sort of turn that thing around. On the Clover station here, I'm just going to show this real quickly. So this normally is facing the merchant, and this has a nice swivel mechanism where you can turn this like that, right? And so this is kind of nice. Unfortunately, this does not have NFC capability built into it, right? Now, okay, so just on this sort of internal implementation architecture, I just wanted to give kind of a peek under the hood with this and to kind of talk about some of the ways, and this is basically for the Clover developer community, right, how one could take advantage of this, right? So this is sort of the core kind of Clover system here, and then I've just listed generic third-party app here just to show that it's not just an internal capability, right? So this is basically, we'll assume this is all running on the one Clover Mini device for this, for argument's sake, for this particular slide, right? So there's an APK here that's running that is connected to USB. Now, in the case with our friends with ShopKeep, this would be a capability that listens over the LAN with a WebSocket connection. Versus USB. But there's basically an adapter here that's going to receive messages from that merchant-facing device, right? And so this thing primarily then kicks off what we call the kiosk app, and this is basically what we see over here right now on the Clover Mini that says, welcome to such and such merchant, and as items are added to the order, they'll show up on this customer-facing device and whatnot. So before we did this re-architecture for the Google Smart Tab, you went from this is basically a hidden app, you go into here, and then you would go straight into the secure payment app whenever the merchant clicks the pay button, right? Are you ready to pay? Okay, click pay. And then we see that this screen basically, when you get there. And so the first version of the Google Smart Tab that we did basically had that same sort of experience. We said, click here to tap, for Google Smart Tab. It went into the secure payment app and it said, okay, scan your phone. Did that, came back, did in Android, like start activity for result, came back here, similar to the way we would do a payment. So I was really pretty pleased that we got that whole, flow working. I'm like, okay, I'm like, okay, so this is great. I'm like, we got enough for the Google I/O, we got enough for the demo. And my boss, who's the co-founder of Clover, is like, oh, it's horrible. There's no way we can demo that. It's got to be seamless there. And I said, yeah, I mean, you realize this is going to be kind of a pretty major re-architecture where we split this thing out into service and all that. It's like, oh, it's got to be, So, okay, so we said, all right, we got the fallback scenario, which is you click an extra button and then you tap, right? So, okay, yeah, that is kind of hokey, but I'm like, okay, we want something to demo or not. But in any case, we went through and did the re-architecture here so that, and the kind of the historical behind the thing there where we had this, reason we call this the secure payment app is the Clover devices was one of the first I think it was only the second worldwide. There was a device built in Australia, but one of the first worldwide that basically did the PIN entry on screen, right? And so now, you hear about your credit card number getting pilfered by Target and whoever else, So this is unfortunately become a pretty common type of thing. But I don't personally recall any scenario where I've ever heard of the PIN number being stolen, right? Unless it's just some real low tech, like just looking over the shoulder at an ATM or something like that. So this PIN entry technology is super. It is so strictly controlled and very tightly regulated. Certifications are very onerous, right? And this is one of the reasons why it's a good partnership now that Clover has gone through that to work with vendors like ShopKeep there, because we can do that PIN entry, and of course you can do debit cards at lower rates for the consumer and for the merchant usually. So this is a nice capability. But this legacy that we had here within this secure payment app was basically, okay, this handles, it takes over the whole screen, it doesn't allow you to have any other kind of thing there, and we wanted to prevent basically some scenario in which a third-party developer comes along and says, hey, insert the card, and they're communicating with this behind the scenes, and then hey, now enter your PIN, right? And do some screen where they're just going to ask you your PIN, just like a phishing screen or something. And so this is is a big concern basically there. So we've basically got an architecture now where we can control for that. If the card itself says it requires a PIN, it will still take over the screen and come back to this, right? But all these other functions where we just want to do a magnetic stripe or EMV, chip card, or NFC, we can do through this secure payment service. So what happens now is we go into this kiosk app, and it starts this, again, secure payment service is kind of a legacy name for it maybe, but it starts basically the interface here, and I didn't show the whole thing here, where basically this secure, we call it secure board because on these Clover Mobile and Mini it is a separate board. On the Clover Flex device it's just a different processor on the same main board, but we this board basically is connected physically to what we'd call the ICC reader, the chip card reader, and the NFC antenna, and also the magnetic stripe reader. So I didn't list those on here because this is mostly software focused, but that's how we're communicating, and we're opening the channel. And again, for battery operated devices such as the Clover Mobile and Clover Flex, we don't have those turned on all the time, right? So we start this up and we say, okay, I want to initiate basically the NFC reader, right, and communicate here. Now normally we would have a sort of a little NFC loop here, that there's a basic card detection sort of method that kind of happens in here, and then we do some quick read of the application that's supported there, and then we hand it off to one of these, what we call the different payment kernels. So this is, unfortunately, Visa's implemented slightly different from MasterCard and from American Express, et cetera. And so what we did is introduced basically more or less a fifth type of kernel here, which says, okay, do the card type detection here and all that. We detect that there's an NFC sort of pair in range, and then we can basically send the message to say, okay, are you VAS compatible? And then we can do the VAS communication here. And then depending on what we've done, so if we're in this kiosk mode, we might just say do VAS only, right? And don't, if they present an NFC payment card or whatever, just ignore that maybe for the time being. And so when we do that here and we detect the VAS, then we're going to come back here, and this is basically an Android. Right now, this is basically an ADL service, right? And so we've got a little API that's coming into this, and it's going to give feedback based on what's happening with, okay, there's been a card inserted or an NFC card presented, and then if and when we read VAS data off of that device, then that'll be transmitted back to this app. And so this third-party app is basically, again, we're sort of trying to finalize what that API looks like now, but basically what our goal would be for any third-party app to be able to kind of participate in this and to read that VAS data when it's presented, right, through sort of kind of normal Clover Android APIs. And so we can, abstract most of those implementation details for you. Okay, any questions on any of that implementation stuff? So I will talk briefly about some other capabilities that are enabled when we do this NFC value add service. So this thing that kind of goes by, it doesn't have really a short, concise name, but POS triggered pass delivery, I think, is the most concise. So this is a scenario in which everyone knows the experience, right? We go to the merchant and they say, "Oh, did you want to sign up for a rewards program?" And you'll pull out, the Costanza wallet and go, "No, I don't. I just, I'm not interested. I don't even want to think about it. I want another card in my wallet. I'm gonna pull it out of the wallet at some point and then forget that I had it, and it's not worth it." And so the digital passes are nice, but how do you get into that digital pass, right? So that merchant who only knows you from your physical presence there, right? They need some way to connect with you digitally, right? And so this POS triggered pass delivery is a really neat thing there, right? Because we could say, so Daniel's going to walk into my store, and okay, so he comes in all the time. So I've got a capability on my POS where I recognize him and I enter his name or pick his name from the thing there. Or maybe we've got a phone number entry on this customer-facing device, as you would see maybe at like a grocery store and whatnot. So through one of these mechanisms, we've identified the customer. Okay, and so now, Daniel walks in and I've identified him. Okay, this is great, and but maybe it requires me to manually do that each time, and so this is, you get a new cashier in there or whatever, and they're not going to recognize him, and so this is not great. But if he comes in and I recognize him, I type it into to the point of sale system, and if he pays now with Android Pay or Apple Pay, we can actually do the VAS protocol communication. So let me see here. If we go back to, so we can do this trigger here. So we're going to send that information, say, is there VAS info for this merchant ID, basically. It comes back and says no. Okay, then we can send actually a payload back to this and say, okay, here is this customer information, some customer ID that we have, maybe, right? Could be email address or just our internally generated ID, and what it amounts to basically the sign-up URL, and push this back to the smartphone, right? And in the Android Pay and in the Apple Pay case, this will actually prompt and say, hey, thank you for shopping at such and such, did you want to enroll in this digital pass, in your sort of notification bar, and you can pull that down and say yes. Inside your Apple Pay or Android Pay settings, it's going to say, okay, do you want to just use your standard info and submit this? Yes, and boom, you've instantly got that pass loaded. So this is a very, compelling type of capability, right, to get towards this digital pass world, right? So, our colleagues here at the at Perka have been doing these digital passes for many, many years now, right? But you've got to download the app, right? So what happens for the people who don't want to download the app, which is many, many people, right? So this is a nice, sort of mechanism, right? So we want to bring people into that digital world, right? But, they're not always going to read the email that we send. They're not always going to click on the web link or whatever, right? So this is a nice capability. And then we already talked about a little bit about the payment with a stored value card, a private label card, something that's a non, NFC type payment. And and so those are capabilities that we're going to work on as well. So that's it basically for my main. Okay, let's see here. Okay, any more questions? And I'll give the best. Actually, James will hand out, so I don't have to throw them. Any more questions on any of this stuff?
So I've got a quick question for you.
Yep.
About what you were just talking about with the ability to push to the device using the VAS. Is
Yeah.
that only through the Apple Pay and Android Pay?
Currently, yes. Yeah. So there is, and they, as you can imagine, they want to sort of tightly control that experience, and so that experience is all on the Apple or Google implementation side, right? So, and they'll only do it once for a particular merchant/pass that you've identified. But they will automatically pre-populate information from your settings thing and all that. So the assumption there is that, you know, a lot of digital passes get, you know, Beavis at butthead.com or something, you know, like kind of bogus loaded in there. I actually had a phone number that was, they kept calling me Mr. Strahan or something, you know, like, because I had some, it was my parents' old phone number. I said, oh, I know they've got a pass. And you know, so it was never, you know, connected to the right actual, you know, information. But this is a way that that's going to be, you know, much more likely to get real valid contactable customer information in it. But again, it is basically all on the Google and Apple implementation side. And our assumption is that, so I think I have a meeting with the Samsung folks in a couple weeks or something, and they're doing something very similar there with Samsung Pay. So yeah. Okay, he gets a toy.
For the third-party app integration,
Yeah.
if your customers are checking out multiple things, say it's at a store and there's certain product, you know, offerings going on,
Yeah.
is that meant so that if you have an extra sort of, you know, special, you know, deal going on at the moment, that it'll collect for that as well, and you can use the same exact system for that, or is there?
Yeah. So if I understand your,
If you have a promotion for a product that you're trying to push, and you have your normal loyalty,
Yeah.
but you want to also track the number of sort of these and give rewards based on just those specifically, is that what the third-party app is about, or is there other uses that you're thinking
Yes,
about?
well, absolutely. There's certainly one very valid use case. What we want to be able to do is, and in this particular thing, we didn't show much, so we can kind of go back here to demonstrate when we detect that VAS info, we want to, and again, the API is still sort of in flux now to determine if we do just sort of an Android broadcast. So think about this is all a full Android device, right? And we can do a broadcast to another app here. We can also broadcast it back to the merchant device and then have that happen something entirely in the background, maybe, right? And so in the case here where we're controlling that entire experience, we're turning, you know, the NFC field on and off and all that kind of thing, we get that information back directly, right? But we also want to be able to say, hey, if this is registered, and again, this is the mechanism we're still trying to flesh out with the API, if you've got that pass, you know, registered there, and I'm not sure, I think at the moment there that we can only define during that VAS protocol communication one, essentially merchant ID. But what we would like to do there at Clover is basically to have maybe sort of like, instead of that merchant ID, we want to maybe have it be the master Clover ID, right? And then have other developers be able to build on top of that, right? So maybe we can have just one pass that's loaded into the wallet and have all of the apps within the Clover ecosystem be able to take advantage of that. So this is kind of what we're trying to, so flesh out now, basically. Figure out the best experience.
Thank you.
Oh, good question.
Yeah, so I see the flow with the NFC payments. So are we saying that first data has to be the merchant processor that just gets payment data from Google Tap? Is that the end?
So that's, in some sense, that's a completely separate question from the Google Smart Tap. So everything that we've got on the device itself, right, does not imply any processor at all, right? Now, the typical Clover relationship where in the Clover sales channels or the selling it through are going to be first data processing. But there are certain instances, certain kind of business arrangements that we would be willing to make there that don't require first data to be the processor. But it's more often than not going to be that, right? And so there's no plans at the moment right now to go out and just sell Clover generically to connect to any payment processor, right? But for specific opportunities, this is certainly possible. And certainly for other countries outside the U.S., there's going to be more of those kind of non-first data processing opportunities, basically. So.
And the second part of that is with this third-party app. I didn't see the device there that you have in hand, but is there a push because of all the delivery services, third-party delivery services, et cetera, Grubhub, for example, where drivers don't work for that store, where they come to your door and you do tap, phone-to-phone tap payments? Is that part of this process as well? Can you extend this to outside that device, where
Yeah.
NFC phone to phone.
Yeah, so there's
Is something like that you guys support, or not
there's
yet?
a couple scenarios there. So one device, of course, our preferred would probably be that they just carry around this nice portable device, right? So this is nice. You can do the chip and all this kind of stuff here. But you can pick up that, show that Clover Go device here. So this is our smallest device. This is what we call with the bring your own device model, right? So this would be attached to either an iOS or an Android phone, right? And we are working right now to enable VAS on this platform as well. So the experience is going to be, slightly different user experience-wise just because of the form factors. But the goal is basically to have that NFC value add service / smart tab enabled across the whole range of devices. Again, with the exception of it's very much the equivalent, right? So you're going to attach this particular one via Bluetooth to iOS or Android in that bring your own device model. So this is analogous to your Square or PayPal type of reader. Yeah, absolutely. So good. Go ahead.
So there used to be soft serve, ISIS, that type of that I think used a secure element on the SIM card. And then Google bought that.
Yeah.
So did that show up anywhere? Did they just kill that off?
That is a good question. So and so I want to say ISIS got rebranded for obvious reasons, but the form, even the Google Wallets stuff, basically all got folded into Android Pay. So I don't remember exactly how what ended up with that ISIS technology there. But basically now everyone's has kind of sort of consolidated on that core NFC protocol, right?
So the secure element is no longer necessary?
Well, it depends on the implementation, right? So I think Google on Android Pay, again, because Android is a more sort of diverse ecosystem, let's say, right? It wasn't always guaranteed that was going to be operating with secure element. The iPhone it is, and with the Samsung, through Samsung Pay it is, and I don't know exactly whether that's true for the Android Pay implementation on this particular Samsung device there. I think that it is with the latest versions of Android Pay. So this is, they're all kind of trying to, reach the same sort of architecture. And so on this, what we learned at Google I/O was I have to, in this mode, if I went and held it up to the Clover device, it doesn't work. But if I just turn the screen on briefly or just tap it, then it works. And so this is part of that hardware and software integration. And again, as an iPhone user, I'm like, why doesn't it just work automatically when you hold it up there, right? But so this is the kinds of things. But it's getting much better with Android Pay, definitely. So, good question.
Have your devices, do they have any integration with beaconing at all? So, for example, on iOS, you can use beacons, Bluetooth beacons, to make your pass pop up,
Yep.
a loyalty pass when you.
Yes, this is when I say yes, I mean yes. This is a good question. We have actually, through our sister company at Perka, there we have distributed physical Bluetooth beacons there as part of this sort of customer rewards and loyalty. On the Clover devices themselves, it's been more of a kind of a tricky situation because for this secure PIN entry, we have to get what we go through. It's called the PCI, so Payment Card Entry Council, PIN Transaction Security Certification. And initially they told us no Bluetooth, no way, no how. Security holes and whatever. Just it's too risky, right? And so in the most recent certification that we're going through, we think that we can enable the Clover devices themselves to be beacons, right? And so this is something probably we'd like to, before the end of the year, kind of open that up also to developers so that these can actually all act as. And in the Clover Station, actually, right now, it's more or less actually doable right now because it's got a full Bluetooth stack, and it's Android 4.2, so it's not that great, but on the newer devices, we want to enable this as well. And so this is kind of stay tuned to our developer pages there. This should be coming maybe before the end of the year, so. Another good question.
just had a question. Can your Clover Go mobile app, can that act as the device itself?
So there's two things with the Clover Go app, right? So the Clover Go app, which you can download from the App Store, right, or the Google Play Store, that can function as your sort of point of sale and order entry and all that kind of thing, right? And and normally in a more limited capacity, right? And we're also opening up what we call the sort of the Clover semi-integrated or remote pay SDK, so that you could go in and build an application there on iOS or Android. When you connect to the other Clover devices, it can be also on Windows, Java, or JavaScript. But for Clover Go, if you want to just have your own app basically connected to the Clover Go reader to do EMV, NFC, and all of that, you can use that same SDK and basically create your Clover Go-like experience, and then use that SDK, which is again common across the family now, and communicate with either the Clover Go reader or some of the other readers as well. So this is the kind of the two options that you would have with the Clover Go technology now. So it's good.
Okay, two-parter. One, Clover, since it was mentioned first data was back in processing, what countries is Clover currently available in? And the other part, and I'll follow up with the next one as soon as you answer that one.
Yeah, so right now the active countries we're in is, of course, United States, United Kingdom, and Republic of Ireland. Okay. And so by mid-2018, we will be in 3 additional countries. One is in Europe, one is in South America, and one is in North America. Yeah. So
TBD.
Yeah, and
that's
so...
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So I haven't booked my return trip, but we will be expanding into
when
those
it's
countries.
Announced, it'll be announced. Okay.
Yeah.
The next question is, I'm more familiar with the Android side. I know that iOS 11 they opened up the NFC APIs. So what's Clover's sort of view on what can be done there?
That's a good question. I haven't actually seen that Apple was willing to do that now. So. That certainly could open up some interesting possibilities for, I want to say, like a ShopKeep type of a vendor, right? But you still have that to do. Interesting part about, and I did a talk at the San Francisco meetup on the payment certifications. There was the driest talk, but it was like, okay, I got a captive audience there. This is this is the thing I know about. So we kind of went into the weeds there on all this payment certification. So without that chip reader there, the NFC is you're not actually going to be able to certify a solution there with, let's say, MasterCard PayPass, for example, unless you can also do the chip. So that kind of sort of for full payment acceptance there, maybe. There's still some ways to go with it. Right. So this could change going forward and all that. So these card schemes are slowly kind of opening themselves up to more sort of ways there. But it's interesting because obviously we partner with them very closely. We also get frustrated sometimes because their specs seem so rigid and narrow. But at the same time, we also have kind of we want. We have the vested interest in basically saying we want that user experience, particularly for NFC, contactless payments, to be very seamless and to be, and to work all the time, right? Which unfortunately it doesn't currently, and this, this is upsetting to us because we put a lot of effort into making sure these, will work at, at all the various heights and all these kinds of things. But in any case, it's good to see that Apple will open that up there. And I think you could potentially see other non-payment types of, functionalities kind of expanded within that, right? Yeah, exactly. And we have, I should kind of just mention briefly there on at least the Clover Mini now, and we're working on enabling it across the rest of the platform. But we have generic Android NFC implemented on this Clover Mini now as well. So this is now possible basically to do generic Android NFC, to do sort of card or a wristband or these other types of things just on that outside of the payment flow, right? And so right now there's a strict separation between those two. But this basically also, again, analogous to the Bluetooth question, basically makes the Clover device, a useful generic, capability, right, for lots of different purposes. So, cool. Okay, only 4 more questions because we have 4 more toys. But, yeah.
Were there extra security layers or protocols added to the Clover devices to ensure that customer data isn't leaked accidentally or maliciously?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a good question. And so we have, so the version of Android that we have is kind of locked down. There's no USB generic or ADB access allowed to it. We have more strict control on the types of applications that are available or that are allowed to be loaded. They all have to be signed with a Clover key, which means that they have to go through the Clover App Store, if you will, or Play Store. And so this is, in some cases may seem a bit onerous, but for our distribution partners, the default really for most of the partners that we work with, like the banks, is they wanted to have like the Bank of America App Store, right? And so we were successful in convincing them no one ever will want to download an app from the Bank of America. Trust us, do not do that. But the negotiation there was that we have more strict controls on what's allowed to be loaded onto the device and all of that. And then within this secure payment application, there's lots of things we had to go through there with this payment card industry certification in order to protect the card data, make sure it's always encrypted, and then the PIN entry, very strict. And this product actually was very much at risk of not getting launched because I think there was one particular vulnerability if you stuck a scalpel like right at the right location to get in there, like at the 11th hour they discovered, okay, you can get in and like if you were like the expert at get in there and put in a wire or something. So anyway, this required some late modification to that hardware design. So this is one of the reasons why we're very keen on this custom hardware. Is very much better at protecting your data really than your stock sort of Apple or Google type devices, right? So. That's probably next.
Yeah. Another one? I got 2 hopefully quick ones for you.
Yeah.
So first of all, the app I'd be most excited to see would be BitPay. So are cryptocurrency exchangers going to be allowed to develop apps on the Clover ecosystem?
The currency exchangers would be encouraged to talk to First Data, and as of yet, so we've done some things in hackathons where it's obviously totally feasible, right? But that would be something that I think we'd be interested in talking, about. It again, in some cases, maybe in First Data's interest, it might be okay, but different partners with whom we have other, sort of specific arrangements, maybe not so much that they would like it. But it's definitely something we want to, as a platform, we're certainly very open to, right? And then as the, certainly with the parent company and the business, it has to be a discussion / negotiation maybe. So.
And then for the second part, so from what I've seen and understand, to purchase Clover, you have to get a merchant account with it. It doesn't come individually.
Right.
And then I've been reading that if I got a system for my little small business and then I switched my payment processors, I switched my merchant account, that I wouldn't be able to take the hardware with me. It would essentially be bricked at that point. Is that true? And if so, why?
So that is sometimes true. There's no technical reason why, but it all depends on the arrangement and the contract that merchant has with what we would call the merchant acquirer, which is usually the bank channel, or in some cases the independent sales organization or whatnot. And so there are certainly ways around that, depending on who you acquire the device from. That it can be repurposed, right? So we'd like to make it so that the Clover devices are cheap enough where it's not really a real problem, right? But again, a lot of it depends on that nature of the relationship with that the merchant acquirer themselves, right? And so this is something we struggle with because we want to provide the best possible merchant experience, right? But there is that merchant acquirer, they're taking on a lot of the financial risk and all of that, so they in some sense own that relationship, and they decide whether or not to lease the device or to sell it outright, and then what they can do with it when it comes back. So essentially, in some sense, you're operating under a license to use the device, and then you would have to return it at the conclusion of that arrangement potentially. So yeah.
I had a simple question about auto enroll. Is saving customer preference enabled for each merchant so that if a customer is going, they're not being prompted every single time if they decline on the first go?
That is a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I might be able to find that out through the specs provided by Apple and Google. I think that it is. My initial impression was that it's unique per each merchant. But thinking of how Apple might do it, they might just provide an ability to say, I want to turn this off altogether, right? So, but. And then did you? I think there's one more up in the front here.
It's a two-part question. One being totally out of this ecosystem. If I just want to understand the whole process of the data movement from the customer to all the way to the merchant processing, where does the data lie and what parts of the data lie throughout the whole workflow?
Yeah. So the question was about the data flow. So all of the Clover devices. And the Clover Go is kind of unique, but it's an app running on your own device, right? But they're cloud connected, but they're going to have some local storage. The technical term would be sensitive cardholder data. Any of that sensitive cardholder data is always going to be encrypted up to the point at which it's basically back sort of in the payment processing system there, and it's securely connected to that issuer. So it's going to be encrypted all the way up to basically the most secure enclaves, whatever, that then are communicating with your issuer in that case. And so customer information, information about the order and all that stuff is going to be cached on that device, and it's going to be always synchronized back to the cloud, right? So the devices operate there where if you have offline and your Wi-Fi's spotty or you're on 3G and it's not so good, the device is still going to operate just kind of like it's a local thing, and it's always going to get it synchronized back to the cloud. And then as a Clover developer, your app basically can request access to each of those different categories of data, right? And so if your app says, hey, I want to do something interesting with customer data, you request that customer read permission, and then you can pull that out and make use of it. And it's up to the merchant through the the app market and whatnot to say, yep, okay, I think this is a useful app, and they can look at your reputation and whatnot and say, yeah, I trust them to be able to read my customer data, right, and do whatever with it, right? And so then you have the whole app store reputation kind of thing and all that to go with. So
the consumer and as well as the your vendor base and as well as the merchant, they all utilize the Clover API to actually extract the kind of information that they want to.
Yeah. So when you say consumer, I mean, that's usually, I'm not doing much as a consumer to interact with that. As a developer, I could go in through, and I'm going to have an application that has to go through an approval process, right? Usually pretty straightforward, and get approved, and then it has to be that app has to have some process where the merchant has to agree to install that app, essentially, just as you would from the App Store or whatnot. And at that point, then your developer, your app that's associated with the developer and that's now tied to a particular merchant can go pull data for just that one merchant. And then if it's installed to the second merchant, it can go pull from both, etc. So
security certifications of when we are actually going for the development on the Clover platform, all the security certifications are being they have to be vetted through the Clover management, or is it also through the other vendors and as well as
and it's also
NFC players and all those things?
It's multiple layers. It's multiple layers. So there are our distribution partners usually have some sorts of audits or other certifications they would ask us to go through. The most important front one from a card processing standpoint, which is a prerequisite for other certifications, is what we call the PCI, and it's PIN transaction security or payment transaction security standard, and that's the most more or less stringent one. And then other Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Discover, et cetera. They all require multiple levels of certification, both for the chip and the NFC, and then also for the magnetic stripe, kind of a higher level. So there's a whole laundry list every time we launch a new device of certifications that has to go through. So yeah, cool. Okay, any more questions? Okay. All right. All right, we're gonna draw straws for the last 5 devices, maybe. But okay, if that's it, that's everything. Thanks very much. I'll just add real quick that I didn't actually show the demo, so I can show that afterwards. Anyone who is interested in coming up and seeing. So I wasn't sure how well people would be able to see that, but it does actually work. I tested it this afternoon again, so but we can show that. And yeah, it may actually work if you've got the pass on there, but probably only on my phone or James' phone for now. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you, Dane. Thank you, Duane. Thank you, Donna and James. Everybody for coming. We love putting these things on. If you guys have ideas for what you'd like to see at future meetups here for the Clover Group, please reach out to me through Meetup, and I'm happy to schedule those. Thanks, everybody.